the Philanthropy Revolution. The word philanthropy means love of mankind. My show is all about the ways we can open our doors and hearts so we can do more good.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our inaugural episode of the Philanthropy Revolution. Thanks so much for joining me. This is my first episode, so I'm probably going to mess up at some point. I might get a little ranty. I might swear, but this is me, full, authentic, and here to serve. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the show and how it's going to work. So every 2 weeks, I'm going to air a new episode. And the first few episodes are going to talk specifically about the revolution. And then I'm going to start adding guests, talking about trends and patterns and things that drive me bonkers, mostly because they're holding us back. And other things that are super juicy and interesting. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments during the show, please feel free to drop them in. And we'll spend some time at the end answering your questions and responding to your comments. So today, I want to talk about the current state of philanthropy and why we need a revolution. I'm super passionate about what I do, and I see a lot of stuff that's going on that is holding us back. And I want to start out by telling you a little story about my trip to India. So I went to India in February. I was there for 2 weeks. And the first day, we went to the Sikh temple and we fed 100,000 people. Now, you might be blown away by that number, as was I. And my tiny little human brain could not wrap itself around, how do you feed 100,000 people in one day? Well, I'm going to tell you. So we went to the community kitchen at the Sikh temple. And by the end of the day, I totally understood. The first place we went was called the Wood Kitchen. And it's a pretty open air building. And there's a cement platform over 4 fire pits, which heat up the cement. And then there's these huge cauldrons. I'm talking like 6 feet by 3 or 4 feet tall. And they're over these cement pads. And you just stir lentils and rice, and you have to constantly stir because otherwise the food sinks to the bottom and sticks and burns. So we had to keep stirring and stirring and stirring these cauldrons of lentils and rice. And it was hot, like between the fire and it being India, we were definitely sweating. They even had a hose running over the floor to keep the cement cool, but it was still really hot, hard work. And it gets tiring because the paddles are about the size of canoe paddles, and you just have to constantly keep stirring, stirring, stirring. So after a while, like your shoulders start to hurt, your arms start to hurt. But luckily, when I got super tired, there was someone to relieve me. So that was part one. So we were making lentils and rice. And then we moved on to the chapati kitchen. So we were at these low tables, and some of us were rolling balls of dough, which we then passed on to the next table where they were rolling them flat. And once they were rolled flat, they would go into a basket, and someone would come get the full basket and take it over to the chapati oven, which is really like a conveyor belt. For those of you who have eaten at dining halls, you'll remember those toaster things where you put the toast in and it goes around and comes out again. Well, that's kind of what this was, only it was about 40 feet long. So, they were just this conveyor belt of chapatis being sent over a flame, and then they shot out at the end. And then once that basket was full, they'd slide another one in and take the chapati downstairs to the dining hall, which was adjacent to the food kitchen. So when we were done making chapatis, you're never really done making chapatis because they feed people 24/7. But when we were done making chapatis, we went down to serve food, and they have 900 people in the dining room, and everyone's sitting on these runners on the floor. And when you come in, they give you this big metal plate. And so our job was to carry buckets of rice or lentils or big baskets of chapati. I let the guys take the buckets because they're like 50 pounds each and you cannot put them down. So I was the chapati girl. And you just go up and down the rows and you fill people's plates and give them chapati. And while that's happening, they're cleaning the dining room upstairs. so that the next 900 people can get fed. And this just goes on all day long. So they're feeding 900 people at a time in 2 different dining rooms, just around the clock with this food. So we then went to the dishwashing room, which was chaotic and crazy and noisy. You've got 2 sets of troughs. They're about 40 feet long and they're separated into sections. And you go from like the sudsiest water all the way down to the rinse water, and you just keep passing it down, passing it down. And then once they're fully rinsed, you hand them to somebody who then puts them in these metal bins, and so they can get used again. And it was just amazing to me that this happens 24/7, 365. They're feeding 100,000 people a day. And it's all volunteers, right? 100% volunteers are doing this, and they operate on donations. So, when we were walking back into the main plaza, my business mentor looked at me, because I'm the only person in the group who works in the nonprofit sector. He goes, "Oh, what do you think?" And my gut reaction was, "We suck." And so part of me was joking, but after having been part of an effort to feed 100,000 people, all doing service to feed other people, um, and thinking about how much food we have in this country and how much wealth we have in this country, and yet how many people are still going hungry. There's so much food that ends up in the garbage, right? And so I just think that in the United States are so modern and we're so innovative that there's got to be a way to close this gap. I mean, here I was in India, in a developing country, where people don't make nearly as much as we do, and yet the generosity was incredible. And I understand that it's part of the Sikh religion. They believe that you cannot have a spiritual life if your basic needs aren't being met, which makes total sense to me. And so it is part of their culture. They're very community minded there. Whereas we are much more independent and are taught to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But there's something really beautiful about this tending to each other and this community. And every single person in that building was a volunteer. There was not one person being paid. I mean, maybe there's one person being paid because somebody has to figure out how to get all that rice and lentils in, and how to manage the truckload of cauliflower that just came in from the local farm. But it's mostly volunteer driven, and it may be entirely volunteer driven. I don't know the details, but it was amazing to me, that I saw all over the place that people are taking care of each other. You know, when we were in Mumbai, we went into this slum called Davari, and it's one of the largest slums in the world. And it's about half the size of Central Park, and there's 1 million people living there. And, you know, a lot of images and assumptions come to mind when we use the word slum. But during our tour of the slum, it is like an anthill, rabbit warren, beehive. It's like there's so much activity. It's insane. So you have to have a tour guide, because otherwise you'll never find your way out of the labyrinth. But again, this sense of community and mutual aid. And when we were leaving this slum, again, my business mentor asked me, he goes, "Well, what do you think?" I was like, "They don't need no social workers in there," right? So there's this sense, there are NGOs in India, and there are philanthropists and people who are helping. And yeah, there's this sense of community, because I asked our tour guide, you know, what happens if somebody can't work, or, you know, they get sick or they're incapacitated? And they looked at me and they said, "Oh, well, other people just take care of them," as if it was nothing, right? So it is part of the fabric of their community. And the other thing that was startling to me, aside from the fact that there were people who were vibrant and happy and healthy and kids running around in school uniforms, right? That just blew all my assumptions about what slums are like out of the water. But they generate $1 billion for the economy every year, right? Take that in. 1 million people are generating $1 billion a year for the economy out of a slum. So I think we think of people who are living in poor areas as being under resourced. And I can tell you, the people in Davari, Yes, they only have access to drinking water or running water 3 hours a day, and sanitation is an issue and overcrowding is an issue, yet they're a vibrant community who take care of each other, and that is kind of what blew me away. So, I think there's some room for us to learn and grow, and I'm always looking for the lesson and figuring out, okay, how do I apply what I'm learning to the nonprofit sector? So, I just think we are creative, innovative people, and we've got to figure out a way to close the gap between all of this food that's going to waste or all of the things that are going to waste and people who have needs. So how do we bridge that gap? And that's part of what being in the revolution is about thinking about those questions, asking those questions. Um, so, here we are in the post-pandemic era, and people are still suffering. I see it all over the place, and I'm sure you do too. People have lost their jobs. More people are losing their jobs as massive layoffs take place. People have lost their homes. Some people are in the process of perhaps losing their homes. And most places are seeing an increase in the number of people who are unhoused. Likewise, animals are suffering. Shelters are overwhelmed. Animals are being forced out of their habitat due to urban and suburban sprawl, deforestation, pollution. Our environment is suffering in all sorts of ways. It's now okay to pollute our drinking water. Like, I don't know about you, but that is not okay with me. Um, so I could go on and on about the problems we're facing, but I don't need to because you see it every single day. You see it with your eyes and you feel it with your heart. So let's do something about it. I believe that all of us together are better than any one of us alone. And history shows us that when we band together, we can accomplish amazing things. So people ended slavery. We have made sure that marginalized groups have the right to vote. We cured polio. We ended segregation. We sent the first man to the moon. And I don't know if you know this, but that was because of philanthropy. Guggenheim's gave Robert Goddard, who happens to be from Worcester, Mass, which is where I live, $1 million to continue his rocket research. And that's the reason we won the race to the moon, is because of Robert Goddard and the philanthropy of the Guggenheim family. So check one off for philanthropy. And we also make sure that people can marry who they want. So in my mind, together, anything is possible, right? I just saw 100,000 people get fed in a single day. Like, talk about expanding my ideas of limits, right? So I'm sparking this philanthropy revolution because philanthropy has been and can be revolutionary. Can you imagine if every single of the 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States had the funding it needs to fulfill its mission? Imagine that. People would be fed, they would be well, they would be thriving, they'd be able to reach their potential. Entire communities could be uplifted. And that's the world I want to live in. And I'm sure that's the world that you want to live in as well, because you're doing the work. So I'm here to tell you that this kind of change is possible. It's going to take time. So the American Revolution took about 10 years. The French Revolution lasted about 8. That's a lot of cake. And the revolution in Haiti took about 12 years. So revolutions don't happen overnight. They take hard work, and this work has to be done by many hands. But revolutionizing philanthropy, which is a system that dates back to the 1630s and Calvinism, I will talk more about that in another episode. It's doable and it's achievable in so many ways. In so many ways, the revolution is already here. We see a lot of things going on in our country that show that we're moving in the direction that we want to go. And contrary to popular belief, there is plenty of money to fund the revolution. So in 2021, US nonprofits received $484.85 billion. Yes, I said billion, billion dollars, right? And And that was up from 472.44 billions in 2020. So that's a 10.6% increase during a pandemic. Giving went up 10.6% during a pandemic. And that figure represents a 5.1% increase over 2019. So billions of dollars are out there, and billions more are being fed into the system of philanthropy every year. So you're seeing these increases every single year of billions of dollars. So there is plenty of money out there. We just have to know how to get it. And that's something I plan to help you do. So individual contributions account for about 80% of those dollars. Does that surprise you? Yep, philanthropy is fueled by people, and it's not fueled by people like Melinda and Bill, although they're making a significant contribution. The majority of donors who are out there are people like you and me, just regular folks making a difference. So the majority of people in the United States, about 70%, contribute to some sort of charity every year. And on average, they give to between 5 and 10 nonprofits. So that means donors are everywhere. You don't have to train them. You don't have to convince them to donate. You simply have to invite them to join your cause, because philanthropy isn't about asking, it's about inviting. So what does it take to be a revolutionary? Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to stand in your worth, not only as a person who's here to make the world a better place, but as somebody who's in a sector that's dedicated to helping people, environment, and animals, to make sure that there's a basic quality of life for everyone in the United States and give people hope for a better future. So stand tall, stand proud, wear that superhero cape, and go get yourself a crown, because you're doing amazing things. Make the commitment to being the best you can at what you do. Learn what you need to learn, insist on using best practices, and then iterate your way to better practices. You guys know what the challenges are out there for the folks and the animals and the environment. You're the ones with the solutions in your hand. Trust me, if there was a handbook, it would have been printed and distributed already. So we have to figure out the solutions for the problems that's still around. So learn what you need to learn and do what you need to do. The other thing I want to see you guys is brag about the amazing work you're doing. Nonprofits are terrible at this. You guys are doing amazing work every single day, and that's why I love what I do. I get to look at this every single day and witness it. And I have such honor and reverence for the work that you guys are doing. But I don't hear you guys brag about it. So, like, get up on the roof with your megaphone and start shouting out to the world, because you're making a difference every minute of every day in people's lives. So people need to hear about the magic that you're doing. And Lord knows we can all use inspiration these days. So shout it out. I'd also invite you to stop settling for less. A lot of times in the nonprofit sector, we kind of just take the crumbs. And I'm going to invite you to stop doing that, because when we settle for less, our clients have to settle for less too. So let's stop setting the bar so low, because it's demoralizing and it's not going to help move the needle on changing the problems that our organizations were born to address. Say it with me: no more crumbs, right? Not only we deserve the slice, we deserve the whole loaf of bread and the bakery. So let's stop settling for crumbs. The other thing I do is invite you to join the revolution. So I'm here to revolutionize philanthropy so that philanthropy can be revolutionary. I'm sure you're as tired as I am of chipping away at the same old problems and not seeing any real progress. I don't want my son to inherit the same set of problems that we did, and I'm hoping you feel the same way. I think we can solve these problems. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. It's going to take some innovation and some experimentation, but I think we can do it. So people are ready to help. They just need direction from us on what that means. So I find that most people want to make the world a better place. They just don't know how to do it. So it's our job to direct them and invite them. Also, you can start your own revolution wherever you are with whatever you have. See something that needs to change? Find one thing you can change about the situation and change it. Then find another thing that needs changing and change that. Enlist others in your efforts. All of us are better than any of us alone. I know that change can be scary, but making the right changes leads to better outcomes for all of us. So I believe that together we can move the needle on the problems that have been plaguing our society for decades, and that we have the power to make the world a better place, especially for those who have been left behind. So that's my rant for today. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Okay, so it looks like we haven't had any questions, but thank you for all your comments. I appreciate that. It's good to see you guys online. So since we don't have any questions, I'm just going to invite you to, am I going to be sharing more about India? Sure, I can share more about India. You guys might get sick about hearing about India. Yeah, I will definitely share more about India in other episodes. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to close out the show, and I will see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Got topics you want me to cover? Organizations you want me to showcase? Let me know. Also, I'm here to help you revolutionize philanthropy at your nonprofit. If you want to talk about what that looks like, drop me an email.